We are the Wintow's, and in this project we wanted to analyze the effect of a head impact on the human brain, specifically as it relates to NFL players. In recent years, the NFL has been in the spotlight for the frequency of concussions that occur in gameplay. Now, while the NFL has instated a series of new rules in an effort to reduce their occurrence, concussions are still prevalent throughout the sport. Now, knowing that repeated head trauma can lead to serious medical conditions, the purpose of our project was to better understand the physical effects these head-on collisions have on the brain. Now, while there are advanced 3D models out there that take into account the effect of the skull, intracranial fluid, and brainstem on the brain during these impacts, for our purposes, a 2D model was sufficient.
In this slide, you see the image we used to trace the outline of the brain. We imported this image into AutoCAD and traced it with AutoCAD's spline tool to create multiple points surrounding the brain. We then took the contour created in AutoCAD and imported it into solid COMSOL to apply boundary conditions. In this slide, you see the two boundary conditions that we imposed upon our model. On the left-hand side, you see the force transmitted through the frontal bone to the frontal lobe of the brain. On the right-hand side, you see the boundary constraints chosen due to the complexity of our project and due to readings we encountered while researching our project. A more detailed model would include both the cerebral spinal fluid encasing the brain and the skull encasing both the brain and the fluid.
So the COMSOL simulations were analyzed to obtain deformation and stress results for a 1300 Newton force applied to the frontal lobe of the brain. The results yielded a maximum displacement value of 62.7 micrometers at the first time step of 0.1 seconds, which occurred near the applied force. These results are shown in the left figure and in the middle figure as well. The maximum stress values obtained was 15.5 kilopascals at a time step of 0.1 seconds, but was observed at the edges of the boundary constraints and the boundary loads. Additionally, COMSOL animations were used to visualize the mechanical behavior of the brain that depicts both the displacement and the von Mises stresses that occurred due to impact.
What we are showing here is the force transmission and the effect of the displacement on the brain. In this animation, we are showing the force transmission and the effect of the stress on the brain.
So here are our displacement results from our COMSOL simulation. We observed that the maximum deformation occurs near the point of impact, which is on the frontal lobe of the brain. The boundary constraints also contribute to an induced moment, which is why we see the brain is kind of forming it's moving towards in a clockwise direction. And we also notice that there's little to no deflection experienced in the posterior of the brain because that is our boundary constraint. So we see here the stress analysis on the force impact on the brain. We notice that there is a buildup of stress in what we believe to be our stress concentrations that are formed by the edges of the boundary constraints as well as the edge of the boundary load induced on the brain.
Although we want to construct our model as real as possible, but there are a lot of things we need to consider and improve. For example, we neglect our skull and the cerebral spinal fluid and the brainstem, which is a large effect on the outcome of research. Also, we make a lot of assumptions, like we assume our boundary load and boundary constraints, which is not as real as possible. So in the future, we will improve these conditions. Okay, in general, our research do the study on the deformation of the impacts during when the football players collide with each other during a football match, and we know that we have already gathered data of the research, and thus we can use this data for the presentation in the future. And for our approach, the process is that we use the brain model with as similar as possible with a real brain, and the concept that there's no skull, no fluid, and no stems as mentioned before. And what we can do next is to improve our model and apply forces on different points so we can do the test as real as possible.